Alrighty then. Welcome back to Movies Safari, the show where I demonstrate why no one wants to go to the movies with me anymore. I'm Dan Voinis. I am a professional snake wrangler, animal rescuer, and wildlife filmmaker. So I'm going to use my experience in the outdoor and natural world to look at films from Hollywood and try and see exactly what they got right and what they didn't get right. Movies are one of the most dominant forms of media in our culture, and they're a way that people get to experience the world around them. However, because they're mostly fiction, they don't feel a responsibility at all to fact-check themselves whenever they write their movies. This is not going to be a critique on the film itself. We do not look at cinematography, directing, writing, acting, anything like that. This is just how they portray animals. Think of this sort of as a educational tool using film as the means by which I educate and enlighten you about biology. As always, if you like my videos, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon to get notified every time I upload. Show some support to this channel so that way I can continue to make these videos for you guys because it's really fun for me and I hope you guys have fun with them too. So let's go back all the way to the 1990s when a little sleeper hit called Ace Ventura, Pet Detective came out. Starring Jim Carrey as the titular pet detective Ace Ventura. It was a fun satire of both the noir genre and the 1980s cop shows such as Magnum P.I. or Miami Vice, and it's become sort of a cult hit. It came out in 1994, and just 1 year later in 1995, they came out with a sequel called Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls. While the first film featured Ace in Miami tracking down stolen or missing pets, this takes the logical next step and brings Ace into the wild, namely Africa. And while pets and domesticated animals are certainly fun, I'm currently watching my cat climbing on top of my bookshelf, which he really is not supposed to do, my field of expertise is with wild animals, wildlife, the natural world and the ecosystem of the planet. Africa is actually somewhere that I've been personally. I spent a month in South Africa filming and working with wildlife. So this is something that not only do I have knowledge of, but I have first-hand experience. So let's see how this applies to this film.
Hungry fella? That ought to hold you for a while.
Alright, so here we have a joke playing on the common notion that birds will regurgitate their food in order to feed their youngs. Now, many birds, particularly carnivorous birds, will do this. It's most common in seabirds and raptors, who may have to compete with other birds who will try to steal their catches mid-flight. So it's very hard for them to take food to their offspring back in their nests. A lot of people think it's because the baby birds cannot chew their food. That really does not make sense when you think about it because all birds don't have teeth. Even adult birds don't chew, they just toss it back. Now, birds have adapted a very special pouch called a crop, which sort of sits in their esophagus right before their stomach, that is used as a pouch to store food. So when food gets stored in there, it doesn't get digested. It doesn't get mixed with the stomach acid you get later in the digestive system. It's just sort of to soften and hold food for them to then regurgitate afterwards. Humans do not have a crop. When we regurgitate or when we throw up, we literally just spew out the bile and stomach enzymes from our stomach along with any content. So that mixture would not be very healthy or nutritious for a baby bird. So if any of you guys happen to keep birds, don't try and throw up into your birds' mouths.
Looks like. Do not fret, my little woodland friend, for your life is in the hands of Ace Ventura, Pet Detective.
So first off, I just want to point out that this is a parody of the movie Cliffhanger. A lot of our younger viewers who weren't really around in the 90s might not know that. But let's talk about the raccoon. The raccoon is a very versatile and adaptable animal from North America. They're intelligent, dexterous, and they can eat pretty much anything. They originally lived in the forests of North America, but with human development and urbanization, they've been able to adapt to countless different environments. However, I think the peaks of the Himalayas might be a bit too much for them. One of the only regions in North America where you don't find raccoons is deep in the Rocky Mountains, where it's very, very montane, very high altitudes, not a lot of growth or life up there. The life that is there is adapted for these extreme conditions. Raccoons, they need to be able to climb up, not just elevation, but physically climb, get verticality. That's why they live in trees, but also in buildings and cities. There's not a lot of food up in the mountains. It's very cold. There's not a lot of places for them to hide. There's not free-flowing water on top of most mountain peaks. It's usually just stone and ice, especially in the Himalayas. Maybe this raccoon would be able to survive if it were to somehow get down to the lower valleys of the range where there is vegetation, there are streams and rivers. They could survive down there, but the actual rocky peaks, no. So maybe it's a good thing that Ace is trying to help this raccoon here. Never mind, he just made everything worse. But this does raise a good point about animal rescue. I've worked animal rescue for about 4 or 5 years now. I started when I was in college. It's very important that you only intervene if absolutely necessary, and if you know for a fact that this animal needs help, and it's because of something that is not part of nature. Because sometimes human intervention can make the situation worse and make it harder for the animal to survive. It's very common for people to see an animal in some kind of situation that may seem strange or dangerous to them, but is actually just part of their natural behavior, or is something that they can get themselves out of very easily. Then when someone tries to help, they end up making the situation worse. Things that come to mind are baby fawns, often left alone by their parents, perfectly normal, but when humans find them, they think they've been abandoned or orphaned in some way. They then remove the fawn, and that completely severs the connection between the fawn and the mother deer. In addition, turtles crossing the road, or many reptiles or small animals crossing the road. If you were to try and move them, you need to move them in the same direction they were headed. If you move them back to where they came from, they will try again. And of course, there's just the fact that any kind of attempt to capture or restrain an animal can result in stress or even injury to the creature itself. What's more, animals that live in areas that are developed by humans, such as cities or suburbs, are more or less adapted to that. They can survive on their own. Just because a raccoon is on the roof of a building does not mean it necessarily is in danger. It might just live in that area. When in doubt, always defer to professionals and experts and never try to do things yourself.
Yes, I heard about that unfortunate accident with the raccoon.
It was terrible for him, but the life force once again smiled upon him. He's now at peace.
So here in this ashram, we see Ace sitting with all of his animal friends. It's not surprising why animals like goats, dogs, and birds are in here, but I'm curious as to some of the larger animals. Tiger kind of makes sense. Historically, tigers ranged throughout Asia, and the Bengal tiger still exists in Himalayan countries like India or Nepal. Lion is a bit different. Lions actually have lived in Asia and in India. There is one national park in India that still has a population of wild lions. However, that is hundreds of miles away from the Himalayas. So, kinda unlikely that these Buddhist monks would somehow get their hands on a lion up in the mountains. As for the llama, llamas are from South America. And as they've been domesticated, they've been bred in places throughout the Americas, but not really in Asia. So I don't know where this guy came from. Okay, so like many Hollywood movies, this movie seems to have just made up a fictitious African nation. Not you! It's referred to here as the Bonai province in Namibia, which is a made-up name. Sounds kind of like Namibia, but it's kind of made up. Now what I'm interested in is exactly where in the world this place is. Now you may ask, what does all this have to do with animals? I'm glad you asked. Whenever I have a movie set in a fictional location, I like to try and figure out where in the world this is supposed to be, using the animals that inhabit it. So here I'm going to be looking at all the animals we see in this fictional country of Namibia, and try and pinpoint where on the African continent it's supposed to be.
Let it down. Yes.
What better animal icon could you pick to represent Africa than the African elephant? Except, this is not an African elephant. This is an Asian elephant. Not only are Asian and the two species of African elephants different species, but they're actually different genera. Asian elephants actually look quite different when held side by side with an African elephant. They have larger domed foreheads and smaller ears. So why did they pick the wrong elephant? Probably because Asian elephants are much more common in captivity and they do fairly better in captivity than their African counterparts. Asian elephants have been almost domesticated, not exactly, but they're able to be raised and trained in captivity in countries like India or Thailand. They're very common in zoos and in the entertainment industry because of this, which you can't really say about African elephants. In captivity, they're usually restricted to large safari parks or very, very spacious zoos.
He owns and operates Quinlan Safari Park.
Most call me Quinn. Say hello, Tinky.
Pleasure, Tinky. Corvus corax, common raven, smartest of all birds. Rare these parts.
So every word Ace just said is 100% correct. That is indeed the common raven. Its scientific name is Corvus corax, and I'd say it's rare there. In Africa, common ravens are only found along the northern coast along the Mediterranean. Definitely not anywhere in sub-Saharan Africa. So to say they are rare, these parts, yeah, I'd say so.
Excuse me. That's quite a wrap you're wearing. Perhaps I could get you some fluffy new slippers made from the heads of innocent and defenseless baby seals.
Mr. Ventura, there's nothing wrong with enjoying the fruits of nature. You should try it sometime.
Alrighty then. You know something? You're right.
As a wildlife conservationist, I can confirm this is the right way to treat rich people who wear furs. Alright, so this snake we see here is a Burmese python. If you can't gather from the name, the Burmese python is native to Southeast Asia, not Africa. Now, Africa does have a very similar and closely related species of python called the African rock python. They get to a similar size, they're very large-bodied snakes, and their pattern is different but still slightly similar. They have the same colors and the same head shape and patterning. So why do they use a Burmese python instead of an African rock python, besides just utter incompetence? Probably because Burmese pythons are very common in the captive trade. Like, absurdly common. To the point where there is almost no demand for zoos or collectors because there is just so many that are being bred and kept in captivity, both in the professional field, such as zoos and museums, and the private trade. People breed them and collect them like crazy. Honestly, not a big fan of it. They are big, impressive snakes, and when you raise them in captivity, they can be fairly calm and easy to work with, as opposed to the African rock python, which is known for being a bit more volatile and can be a little more hostile when handled. So it seems Burmese pythons are just natural stars in the entertainment industry.
majestic song of the male silverback gorilla.
I think we should move along. It's their mating season, and they can get rather hostile.
I will talk more about this later, but I just want to mention now, this film does feature a punchline about sexual assault. Now, if you don't want to listen to that, at this time code, you will see this icon appear. As long as this icon is in the top corner, please mute the video. When the icon disappears, then you can turn the volume on and continue watching the video.
But they now live in fear since the vanishing of their sacred bat. Bat? What? Bat? The one we're here to find, Mr. Ventura.
You didn't say anything about a bat.
What's the difference?
What's the difference? Have you ever seen a bat? They're hideous.
Alright, so Ace here seems to suffer from chiroptophobia, also known as the irrational fear of bats. This is a common fear. Bats are particularly demonized in both our culture as well as many other cultures around the world. As Ace puts it,
lifeless beady eyes, clawed feet, huge grotesque wings, fangs.
They give you rabies, you know.
However, the fears that people have are largely unwarranted. Bats are harmless. They're just small mammals like any other small mammal. They have wings. They don't have any desire to hurt anyone. They don't attack people. They can't really eat you or have any reason to cause any harm or much ability to cause harm. In fact, I think they're pretty cute. Look at this guy. How about this guy? Now this one's really adorable. Look at him. As for the concern about rabies, that is a little more grounded. Bats are a very well-known vector for rabies. However, it's not as common as people think. Studies show that only 6% of all bats tested for rabies actually test positive, and that's just the bats that are tested. The bats that get tested have a higher chance of having rabies than the bats that don't get tested, because bats that have rabies are usually easier to catch. So as a whole, bats have a very, very small percentage of carrying rabies. And even then, the only way to get rabies from a bat is from a bite, which unless you are trying to physically pick up or mess with a bat is absurdly unlikely to happen. So there's really no reason to have an irrational fear of them. Remember, fear is just lack of understanding. And when you understand, you don't fear.
What type of bat are we talking about here?
The great white bat, of course.
Crepuscular Chiroptera.
Yes, but to the natives, Shikaka.
Now, there is no such thing as a great white bat. Nothing here, and nothing here, or here. The scientific name that they list in this movie is Crepuscular Chiroptera, which is not a scientific name, that's just a description. In fact, those words are English. Crepuscular is a term meaning active at dusk or dawn, around twilight. It is the little-known third option for being nocturnal or diurnal. It's crepuscular. That's right, an animal's circadian rhythm is non-binary. As for Chiroptera, Chiroptera is a taxonomic term referring to the order that comprises all bats. Any bat is Chiroptera. So literally, Crepuscular Chiroptera just means a bat that is active at dusk, which...
Do you have the slightest idea how little that narrows it down?
This fruit paste is delicious. And the pottery is lovely.
It's made from guano.
Guano! That sounds so familiar.
Bat droppings. Guano is the chief resource of the Wachati. They use it to make many things in the village.
Yummy!
Alright, now guano is the word for bat droppings, but is also the word for the droppings of seabirds. Really, guano is just feces that accumulates over time on rock layers, be it in a cave where bats are, or on a rocky coastline where you get seabird colonies. As for making pottery, I tried to look it up. I did some research. I could not find anything that suggests that cultures have used guano as a means of creating objects like pottery or dishes. I'm not going to say they never used it, I'm just saying that I don't think that's really a thing. I mean, I guess there's no reason you couldn't make pottery off of it. Guano decomposes very quickly, all the organic material breaks down and just leaves behind the minerals fixed by the bacteria. So, you know, if you just take the powder and use water and make a clay out of it, I guess you could. It's not going to be the same as, you know, what you're thinking of taking the poo and, like Play-Doh, making a bowl out of it. It's a lot more just using it as a sediment. But, again, nothing I could find. I can't imagine it would be a very common thing considering it's poo. This just feels a bit more like some insensitive cultural stereotypes, you know? Oh, those people in Africa, they're so uncivilized. They live in huts and wipe themselves with leaves and make bowls out of poo. Yeah, sometimes we can be mean to other cultures. Now here we see a privately owned safari park. These are the other major form of protected wildlife areas in addition to government-run parks and preserves. Safari parks and ecotourism are one of the major sources of income for many countries around the world, sub-Saharan Africa included. Many people view it as a way to economically incentivize wildlife conservation, although there are many problems with that, which I will address a little bit more later on. However, many megafauna animals, such as elephants or lions or rhinos, are found almost exclusively on protected land. There really is very little true wild left in Africa. Now, I'm not going to count any of the animals we see in the safari park when I'm trying to figure out the location of this country, mainly because a lot of animals in safari parks are stocked there artificially. In fact, sometimes they will stock animals that were not originally native to that area, just because it sort of completes the visitor experience to see lions and rhinos and hippos and crocodiles and elephants. Just to prove my point, in this cage you see a tiger, which has no place in Africa.
McCain, how you doing? I'm doing
well. Don't mind me, Mr. Quinn. I'm just a curious little rhino.
I appreciate your agreeing to undertake this.
Alright, so here we see Ace using a mechanical rhino to sneak up on some of his suspects and overhear the conversation. He's assuming that they're not going to think anything about a rhino, and they'll be completely calm chatting about their possible evil doings this close to a rhinoceros. However, no park owner or outdoorsman in their right minds would ever allow themselves to get this close to a rhinoceros in the wild. Rhinos can be insanely dangerous. They have very poor eyesight, so they rely on their sense of hearing and their sense of smell to detect danger. Now, if they hear or smell something that sounds like it could be a predator, they will not take that chance. Anything that gets too close to them could trigger a defensive charge, and rhinos have been known to kill people.
Won't be long now, Katie. Big night tonight. You're gonna meet your new owner.
G'day, disgusting rat.
Did you hear that?
What is it?
Silverback. We get $5,000 for one of those.
Alright, now let's talk a bit about poaching, because it is a large, prominent, and very serious problem with wildlife conservation. First off, the comment about making $5,000 off of a silverback gorilla is not too far off. The wildlife black market, or the illegal wildlife trade, is the third largest and most profitable black market in the world, trailing right behind drugs and weapons. In it, animals are taken from the wild, either alive or dead, and sold for any number of reasons, from food, the pet trade, to trophies, to the Asian traditional medicine market. Now, this film seems to perpetuate the idea that poachers are rugged white men, usually with some kind of Australian or British accent, wearing khakis with a wide brim hat, sort of like a darker version of the archetypal great white hunter, and that these men are driven by cruelty and greed. But in actuality, most poachers are locals who are driven to poaching out of economic desperation. These are people who have lived in these areas for generations. Their bush skills have been passed down from parent to child over and over again for many, many years, who often find themselves with no other options for supporting and feeding themselves and their families. Africa is a country plagued by poverty, resulting from centuries of colonization and exploitation by European countries. What's more, changing political structures, laws, and regulations often uproot people's entire livelihoods and make some trades or practices completely illegal when that's how people have been feeding themselves for years. Even when parks and wildlife preserves are built or expanded, it uproots and displaces many people who have been living there for generations. These communities were often impoverished to begin with, and that just makes everything worse for them. They essentially take the entire burden of wildlife conservation without receiving any of the benefits, because all that money doesn't go to them, it goes to the people and governments running the parks. This is where the international black market comes in, because these traders, these career criminals, find these people and exploit them. They hire these impoverished locals to hunt for them, to commit crimes on their behalf, because it's economically feasible for them. Suddenly, these people are finding they can make thousands of dollars off of hunting just 1 or 2 animals a year. So of course there's more incentive for them to hunt illegally than to play by the laws that are currently harming them. Not to mention it's seen as an active resistance for these systems that have put them in these terrible situations to begin with. Now these people are finding that just by killing or trapping just a handful of monkeys or a couple turtles or 2 or 3 rhinos a year, they're suddenly completely financially stable and able to support themselves and their families. But multiply this by hundreds, if not thousands of people across continents for many, many years, and suddenly you have a biodiversity crisis. You have animals that were already vulnerable from habitat depletion, resource destruction, and other human activity suddenly being pushed to the brink of extinction. This is why poaching and other aspects of conservation are such complex issues and can be very controversial. If it was just a matter of an easy fix, then it would have already been done.
I'm alive! Don't start what you can't finish!
Quit hitting yourself! Quit hitting yourself! Quit hitting yourself!
Oh, water tastes good, yes! Glub.
For those of you who remember my Jumanji video, you may know that A, crocodiles are some of my favorite animals on Earth, but B, trying to wrestle a crocodile in the wild is probably one of the most dangerous and dumb things you can do, especially when it is a Nile crocodile, the second largest and probably most dangerous crocodile on the face of the earth. Nile crocodiles are believed to be the animal that kills the most people for the purpose of predation. They are of course outclassed by hippos and mosquitoes, but again, predation. Crocodiles are immensely powerful. They're just solid tanks of armor and muscle, and they have the strongest jaws in the entire animal kingdom. Now once they get in the water, they suddenly become far more maneuverable and a lot faster. So if you're in the water with them, they can kill you in an instant. There's nothing you can do. You can't drown them. What are you going to do? Hit them? Choke them out? You can't. They're just going to wrap around you, grab you with their jaws, and then kill you. There is no way that Ace would survive, no matter how much he gives the crocodile a swirly.
I've come for the sacred bat. Where is it?
Why, Ace, whatever can you mean?
Guano. Hello? Does poop ring a bell? Guano! Mines as a source of nitrate, producing 84% of the world's supply of fertilizer. A $1.4 billion industry. That's what this war is all about. You can't legally take possession of the caves as long as the Wachatis inhabit the area. And you want that dookie so bad you can taste it.
Alright, so while guano is not much of a pottery material, this part is actually very true. The organic material in guano, the part that makes it stinky poo, breaks down very quickly. It is fixed by nitrogen-fixing bacteria that basically leave behind nothing but just the raw minerals and nutrients contained within it. These minerals include nitrogen and nitrates, potassium, and phosphates, all of which are key nutrients for plant growth. So guano really is a very valuable material for use in fertilizers. So much so that seabird guano was such a valuable resource for fertilizer that it actually was a driving force behind much of the American and European colonization of islands and archipelagos throughout the world. The United States even passed an act called the Guano Islands Act, which basically claimed any unclaimed island that produced bird guano, and it is still in effect today. Now, bat guano specifically is also a very valuable source of fertilizer minerals, but it also was the source of potassium nitrate, which is a key component of gunpowder. And mining bat caves for guano was a very big industry in the United States during the 1800s. So, yeah, I could see it as motive for a political war crime.
What are you doing?
Okay, now elephants, be they Asian or African elephants, can be very, very dangerous. A lot more dangerous than knocking someone over. A bull African bush elephant can weigh up to 10 tons, with powerful legs and long tusks. They can crush you, bludgeon you, throw you, or even impale you. And between the three species of elephant throughout the world, hundreds of people are killed just by provoking them.
Friends! Rodents! Quadrupeds! Lend me your ears!
What the hell's going on?
You see, humans and animals can live in harmony.
No, I just wish I had this power. Okay, so this is the part where that content warning comes in. Aside from just being a very poorly aged joke about sexual assault from an animal, this actually speaks to a larger myth concerning gorillas. It's largely been forgotten now, but for about 100 years it was the main preconception about gorillas as an animal. When Europeans first discovered gorillas in the mid-19th century, they feared them. They believed them to be savage monsters, largely because they were so close to humans, but also so large and powerful, unlike any other primate they'd seen before. Soon, an idea began to circulate amongst Western countries. They believed that since they were so human-like, but also so savage or aggressive or dangerous, they feared that the gorillas would stop at nothing from kidnapping and raping white women. In fact, it was believed that it was too dangerous for a white woman to go to Africa, because the danger of them being attacked by a gorilla was so great. This idea stems from the notion, however incorrect it may be, that white women were the most beautiful and the highest forms of human beauty attainable. It was popularized by art, sculptures, fiction, and it became the dominant idea of gorillas. In fact, it is even believed to be the inspiration behind the film King Kong. And now it's hard to ignore the at least superficial similarities between this and certain horrible racist ideas and stereotypes that were popular at the same time. I don't know if there's any connection between the two. That's not my area of expertise, but it is hard to ignore. What I do know is that this idea could not be farther from the truth. Gorillas in general are very gentle animals. They're vegetarians. They would only ever become dangerous if they believe you to be a threat to themselves or their family groups. And while they possess great strength, they only ever turn dangerous when they are threatened or provoked by humans.
To the jungle, Bubba!
And that's it for the movie. It's definitely a goofy, silly 90s classic, even if some parts don't age very well, or some parts are very fictitious. But now I have to answer my own question. Where in the world is this fictional land of Nibia? Well, looking at the wild animals we see, I count cheetahs, bush elephants, blue wildebeest, gorillas, rock pythons, reticulated giraffes, mandrills, and the Nile crocodile. Now I took all their geographic ranges and overlaid them onto one map to find any overlap. And I have found that there is no one part of Africa where all these animals are native. Now this actually makes sense when you think about it. Animals like cheetahs, bush elephants, wildebeest, and giraffes are all savanna animals, ranging mostly in the drier parts of the continent, like eastern and southern Africa's, countries like Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. However, animals like gorillas or mandrills are more commonly found in the tropical rainforests of the continent, mostly in western and central Africa, such as the Congo or Gabon. You can't just ignore those because gorillas are mentioned 3 different times in the movie and play an important role in the plot. What I think this is a classic example of Western countries homogenizing the continent of Africa into one monolithic stereotype. People tend to think of Africa as one single region, the same way we would discuss China or Germany or India. However, Africa is an immense continent with wide and diverse ranges of ecosystems and biomes, wildlife, and people. It's estimated that Africa is the most culturally, genetically, and ethnically diverse continent in the entire world, which makes sense considering that's the continent where humans have been around the longest. So if you take nothing else from this video, let it be that there is so much more to this great continent than you might think, and that it is definitely worth taking the time to learn about and educate yourself about its fantastic people and incredible wildlife. All this from a man talking out of his butt. Thank you for watching my video. Please, if you liked it, hit the like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let me know what you learned, what your favorite little tidbit is, what's your favorite part of the movie, and what movies you want to see me do next time. You guys enjoy yourselves, and of course, stay incredible.